Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Sarah and I'm here with Murray and John. And today we'll be discussing presentation design tips. And even though we're focusing on presentation design, you can really apply most of these concepts to any design or marketing project. And so we'll start off by just quickly introducing ourselves. We are graphic designers for UCI Student Affairs, Creative and Marketing Communications. And we provide creative services for all the clusters of the Division of Student Affairs, which are the Office of the Vice Chancellor, Student Life and Leadership, Wellness, Health, and Counseling Services, and Auxiliary Services. And so on this next slide, I have some examples of work that I've created for Student Affairs, and I'll pass it on to Murray.
Hi, yeah, here's just a couple of some of the work that I've done this past year with Student Affairs. I am a graphic designer for the Wellness, Health, and Counseling cluster, and I will pass it to John.
Everyone, my name is John. I'm the graphic designer for the Student Life and Leadership cluster, and here's a few examples of some of the work that I've done so far. So today we'll be going through a few design principles that you can use in your presentations in order to deliver your information more effectively to your audience. The first design concept is composition, and composition basically means being aware of the space within the borders of your presentation, how objects fit into that space, and the motivations for why certain objects are placed where they are. One way to approach composition is with hierarchy. Hierarchy is the ranking of objects within the frame to show order of importance. It's a good way to lead your audience's eye. In this example for a sausage company, if you squint your eyes, the first thing you see is the brand name, then to the top that says smoked cauliflower bratwurst, then the illustrations, then the tinier technical text. Notice how the use of size and style contrast guides your eye and how you read things in a certain order. This slideshow itself uses hierarchy, with the title, headline text being the boldest and biggest at the top, and then the body text, then the subscript under the example. Alignments are a way to organize and present your information. There's three main types of alignment: left, center, and right. Left is the most common and easiest to read. Center is more for important bits of information and smaller pieces of information. And right alignment is more niche, but it's dynamic, but it's also harder to read. Ultimately, the goal of alignment is to help your audience read your information as effectively as possible. One common compositional problem is the tangent. Tangents are basically when the edge of one object directly touches the edge of another object. It's usually unintentional, but it causes readability issues since it skews the audience's orientation of space. It's also kind of claustrophobic and makes you feel literally on edge. So in order to fix this problem, just be aware of the space. Either give more space between the objects or overlap them. You can also mess with the size and position of your objects as well. These are all effective strategies that fix this common design problem. Breathe space is the same concept, just being aware of the space around your objects. In this example, we see the Apple logo, its relative spacing within a lockup, and how considerate you should be when placing it. You don't need to be this technical, but you should be considerate of your objects in a similar way. The next concept deals with information. Our main goal as designers is delivering information in effective and visually compelling ways. So here's 2 tips to help. The 5-5-5 rule is a good guide to help your slideshows stay engaging and fresh. Essentially, you shouldn't use more than 5 words per line, 5 lines of text per slide, or 5 text-based slides all in a row. The rule is meant to keep things dynamic, easy to read, and helps maintain the attention of your audience. Another helpful presentation tip is to avoid reading directly from your slides. One main reason is that it's a bit boring, and you don't want people to think this could have been an email. Make good use of their time. Use your slides as an opportunity to show your passion and your expertise, and that you know what you're talking about, and keep your audience engaged. A good way to do this is first, simplify your slides. Make the information easy to digest, then expand upon your points with your voice. That way you engage your audience both with visuals and sound at the same time. Again, keeping your audience engaged. Okay, so far we've covered composition and information. And the third principle of design is consistency. Consistency isn't the same as monotony. Consistency is about keeping your audience under your spell. So if they see that something is off, they'll get distracted. You want to keep them engaged and focused on the information, not on the fact that the header is in the wrong position. So here we have Air Bud shooting a free throw. Using a sports analogy, consistency is like free throws. You shoot from the same spot, same distance. You move your arm in the same arc and release the ball at the same point. It's the same with design principles in your presentations. Some things to keep in mind in order to achieve consistency: create a set of slides that have similar elements. This includes typography, color, and spacing. Using our presentation again as an example, we use the same header and body text throughout the whole thing. Another thing to create consistency is maintain a simple color palette. This presentation only uses 3 main colors: blue, yellow, and orange throughout the whole thing. Use consistent spacing conventions. So if the text is 100 points from the edge of the screen, keep it 100 points throughout the whole thing. And ultimately, don't be afraid to use templates. Good ones are consistent in style. Analyze them and adapt them to your needs. So with that, I'll hand it over to Sarah.
All right, so our next topic is color. And so color is a powerful tool for communication. It can convey emotion and draw your viewers' attention to key points. Here we have an example, very vibrant, colorful piece, and the accent colors really pop against the dark background. And so then a great starting point when thinking about color is throwing it back to the color wheel. You can build a color palette based on the relationship of colors on the color wheel. And so on the next slide, I have a few examples of different color schemes. The first, we have monochromatic, which is a color scheme with one color using different saturations and values. And as you can see, the subject blends into the background and the blues create a moody, solemn vibe. And then we have analogous colors, and these colors are next to each other on the color wheel. Because these colors are similar, they work harmoniously together, and the bright pinks and oranges create a vibrant tone to this artwork. And lastly, we have complementary colors. These colors are on the opposite ends of the color wheel, and so they really pop against one another and create a high contrast between the different elements. And so here are some great websites to build your color palettes. Peloton is a great way to explore these color relationships within the color wheel. And you can create a really interesting color palette, playing with triads, complementary colors, and these different color schemes. And then we have Coolers, which is awesome for creating interesting color combos. With just the click of a button, it'll automatically generate a really interesting color palette. And so another important thing to think about when choosing colors is brand identity. And so if you're representing a brand or organization, take a look at their brand guidelines. And I'd recommend updating your color palette or design to those brand colors. That way you can really drive home their brand identity. And so jumping into some no-nos, these are things to avoid when dealing with color. The first one being color vibration. So vibration happens when colors are too close in saturation and value, and this creates low contrast between your colors, which makes them difficult to read. And so a good way to test if you have good legibility with your colors is to squint your eyes. And if you can read the text easily, you're good to go. But if you're having a hard time differentiating, you should adjust the lightness, darkness, and saturation of your colors to get good contrast. And so on the next slide, we have that nice contrast between the colors that makes it a lot easier to read. And so another thing to avoid is a busy color palette. When you have too many colors going on, you lose visual hierarchy. So you don't know where to look first. And this creates a muddled tone. You can't really tell what the vibe is in the example on the right, and the info is hard to read. So instead, you should be using color strategically. Use accent colors to draw your viewer to the key subjects and give breathing room for the eyes to rest by integrating neutrals into your color palette. So the next topic is text. You can see we have a very, not the greatest font choices here for a serious topic. And as you can see, similar to color, text can affect the tone and the effectiveness of your presentation. And so another important thing to think about when you're thinking about color is text legibility. There are several factors that affect text legibility, and so I have a couple examples here. The first being contrast. So more contrast in letter forms often leads to less legibility. So in the bottom example here, the serifs, which are the lines at the ends of the letter, are much thinner than the stems or the vertical lines of the letter. This results in high contrast, and so at a smaller scale, this font will be more difficult to read than something that's more consistent in shape like the top hello. Another consideration is spacing. Make sure you have breathing room between your letters and lines for good legibility. And lastly, the size of your letters matter. At least 14 points is recommended for presentations. All right, even though you are thinking of legibility, you don't have to sacrifice on style. You just have to be strategic with your fonts. So for larger text like titles and headings, you can go for a font that's more decorative and stylized to match the tone of your subject matter. Because it is larger, you can sacrifice a little bit on legibility because it's at a comfortable reading size. But for smaller text, I'd recommend going for a font that's more simple and consistent so your text remains easy to read. Combining fonts is another opportunity to have fun with type. Try combining opposing styles to create interesting pairings. That's what we've done in this presentation with a bubbly font for the headers and something clean and modern for the body text. But keep it simple, 2 to 3 fonts for one presentation is plenty. And so my last point about text is that you can get a lot just out of one font by switching up different style elements like boldness, size, and capitalization. This helps differentiate your information and build that visual hierarchy that will make your info easier to digest. And so we'll move on to the next topic with Murray.
Hi, so dynamic visuals. So like basically how to add, fun media to your presentation. Icons can be really fun. They're small, they express a lot. So they're very useful in all types of presentations and graphic art that you do. Just some kind of best practices around that is to, keep it consistent, stay on brand, make sure that the icons that you use, that everybody, it's like universally understood what that symbol means. Otherwise, they won't have the same impact. It's fun to use a little bit of like motion graphics in your iconography, but so you can turn them into GIFs if you can, or access GIFs. And some great resources to find icons that you can use in your presentations are below: Icon Finder, Noun Project, and Streamline. And then images, obviously, you want to throw some images into your presentation. And these are just really, basic rules of thumb to follow when it comes to images. So let's start with the don'ts. You don't want to skew your photos. You don't want them to be stretched. You definitely do not want to use watermarked photos. That's such a no-no. And there's so many royalty-free sites out there that there's no reason to use stolen images, like things that you don't have the license for, and there's no reason to use something with watermarks in it. Lastly, on the don't side is a great way to handle images that you need to create for a presentation is to use AI created images, but this one shows like AI gone wrong. So you want to make sure that the image kind of makes sense, that people have the right amount of fingers, that it's not too crazy or weird, unless that's what you're going for. But even just then, when you're choosing photos for your presentation, you don't want them to be so extraordinarily interesting that it takes away from your presentation. So just, again, try to stay on brand, stay on point, stay on topic. So then when you go over to the do's side on the left, you know, these are clean. That's also an AI created image, but it doesn't look wonky. It's not too many things in one image. It makes sense. And then when you put some text over it, the white text is over a dark spot in the photo. None of the photos are skewed. And you can do fun stuff like masking photos to just, you know, give your presentation a little bit more aesthetic pop. The Google Sheets allowed me to make fun stuff, but also be able to use the same font in the explanation of the graph and also use the brand colors. That was great. So yeah, making sure that everything's labeled, that it makes sense, that it's clear and easy to read is great. And you don't really want to just use screenshots from Excel. That can be really boring. So this is where these Google Sheets make it pop a little bit more because it's got fun color and it's also representative of everything else you've put together in your presentation. So yeah, next, just sort of a rule of thumb when you're being creative, when you're putting together something creative, is to remain curious and collaborative. Those are things that just help you in general put together better work. Inspiration, you can find it so many different places, but it's great to look around the world, and when you see things that you like, maybe take a photo of them and keep a file of just interesting fonts that you see or design that you like. Design blogs offer a lot of inspiration. You can scroll through them and get new ideas. We have a couple right here that you can take a look at. It's Nice That and Design Inspiration. Definitely enjoying art of all types supports in general just your aesthetic growth. Fashion specifically and understanding sort of how aesthetics change over time can be really helpful because a lot of times fonts and styles of graphic design also connect to the time period. So, you know, certain fonts might be popular in the 1950s. And so when you bring that font into your presentation, it obviously speaks to that look and feel. So you can do a lot if you understand the history of art and whatnot. And then lastly, my favorite thing is mood boarding. So I use Pinterest all the time. Every single time I do a project, I go to Pinterest and I put together boards and I will make a whole grouping of aesthetic things that all fall under maybe one aesthetic label, like clean and modern or something like that. And so to the right are just different examples of mood boards that I've made for different projects. And they can really help you because sometimes with design, there's so many options. There's so many places you can go in a project that half the battle is just picking one. So this is a really great technique to help you choose a look and then create it from there. And then sharing and feedback. So if you have peers that can help you, please, you know, when you're ready, and this is really key, when you're ready to share, when you feel like it's pretty much 100%, that's a good time to then gather feedback. So you need to be able to hear it and ready to hear it. So sharing when you're not ready, that can be kind of frustrating for the designer and it can be hard on the person who's giving the feedback. But as long as you're in a place where you're open, then somebody can tell you what they saw and it just gives you a whole different perspective. And sometimes they'll just catch things that you didn't catch. Sometimes the longer you've been inside of a project, the less you see. So it's just really great to get outside feedback. And then even if you don't like some of the things that they suggest, just try it, because that's the weird thing is sometimes you just never know. And then you try it and you're like, oh, I never picked that, but it works, you know? So give it a shot and, you know, that helps you just tweak and upgrade your work a little bit more and get it finalized. And then here's all the resources that we gathered throughout the presentation. And so these are all available for you.
Thank you everyone for joining us today to talk about presentation and design tips. And follow us on UCI Student Affairs to follow more of the design projects that we create.